Alright, let's get started here with coding basic HTML. From the previous video, you must have already downloaded your favorite browser. I'm using Google Chrome. You must have also downloaded Visual Studio Code. Alright, so a few ways you can get started. You may have a folder you want to use, or you could right click on your desktop and select new folder to create a new folder. So I'm going to create a new folder and rename it to 100 Days IT Challenge. Notice that I try not to put spaces in between because it's going to be problematic in future. We'll talk about that later. And click out, the folder is created. That is one way of doing it, but I'm going to show you how to get this done in Visual Studio Code. If you want to open this folder in Visual Studio Code, let me move it here so it's more visible. You can right click on the folder and you can see right here there's an option to open with code. That option is available because we clicked on that option when we were installing Visual Studio Code. So if you already have a folder, you can do that. So I don't want to use this, I will use the next method. So let's delete the folder and go to Visual Studio Code. Once that opens up, we should be able to move forward from there. So Visual Studio Code opens up on the side. Let's expand that. Awesome. So it starts up with the welcome page. You might be familiar with it. On the welcome page, you can open a new file or create a new file, open an existing one, or open a folder like the one we had earlier. You can also connect to the remote resource. Now there's nothing we've done recently, so this is blank. I highly recommend that you go through the walkthrough. Okay, you can learn the fundamentals of using Visual Studio Code, or you could follow the tutorial. So let's go into more, and you'll notice that there are two options you can pick from. We already went through this, but I'll go ahead and start again from there. You notice that we set up our theme. We also add the settings to save automatically once we waste a little bit of time, and so on and so forth. Again, I want to encourage you to watch the video tutorials. There are about 8 of them. It takes you about 30 minutes. It's going to be very useful. So you can mark that as done or go to the next section. Here, you'll notice that there are some extensions we talked about earlier. The extensions for Python, you can use that for Jupyter notebooks, C and C++, GitHub, and sharing your code, ECMAScript link for JavaScript, Vue, which is a JavaScript framework, and also Sense for checking, or Lens for checking out your code. We will be using Prettier, but we'll get to that later. Also, you can get to work with the built-in terminal. Those are all features that are within Visual Studio Code. It is important that we install Git. So we'll look at that later on when we dedicate some time to look at Git and GitHub. Git and GitHub, to clarify very simply, Git is a version control tool. Version meaning your source code has different versions. You work on it today, tomorrow, next week, next month. It helps you keep track of that so you don't go about renaming your file as final, final one, final. This is the final. Yeah, that's going to be a pain to realize efficiency. So Git helps you do that locally on your machine. GitHub is where you and every other one that is coding in this world can go ahead and host their code. So it's a hosting service for your code. While you're tracking it locally, you can also make it available publicly, or you can put it on GitHub, but set it as private so every other person doesn't see it. There are a lot of shortcuts also, which we'll look at again as we get to use the tool. So I just wanted to point those out for you. Now, for us to get started, we go to the Explorer on the top left. In here, we can open a folder, which we do not have. Remember, I deleted the folder. So let's click on Open Folder. It takes me to my home page or my home document. So let's go back to the desktop. In the desktop, there's nothing in there. We can go ahead just within Visual Studio Code and create a new folder in here. So let's do that and call it 100 Days IT Challenge. And just like that, our folder is set up and ready for us to use. We select it and click on Select Folder. That takes us into the folder, which is currently empty. So it's going to ask us if I trust the contents of this folder and so on and so forth. Yes, I do. I can go ahead and run the code that is in there. Now, if you're done using the welcome screen, you can decide to show the welcome screen every time you start up, or uncheck this if you don't want it to be shown. So it's up to you. For now, I'm going to go ahead and close that welcome screen. And this is what your home plate will look like. Here are some shortcuts to get you started if you need. But now we are in our folder. Our folder is within this workspace, this area, this column you have on the left is your workspace. Within this folder, you have a few icons here. You can either create a new file or create a new folder within your folder. Okay. One thing I usually encourage my learners to do is have different environments. You have an environment where you write your code. You have another environment where your code gets tested, and another one where your code is going to reside in a production environment. It's going to be live for everybody else to use it, so you don't make changes in the live environment. This can be set up using Git and GitHub, but we can go ahead and create folders in here to get started and say, let's call the first environment dev for developer environment. You can also use 01 dev to make sure that it's synchronized alphabetically, or should I say from ascending or descending order. So that's our first folder. Still within our main folder, we can create a second folder and call it 02_test environment or staging environment. Okay, and create yet another one. Oops, not in there. We want to create it in our main folder. We're going to call that 03 prod for production environment or live environment. Now your environments are all set up. Let's go into our development environment in here and create a new file. It's going to be our very first HTML file, so we can call that my website without any space in between. Okay, so once my website is written, we have to remember HTML documents have to end with .html. For now, I'm just going to leave that name as it is and press enter. It created that file and it also opened up the file for us. Now I'm going to switch my screen so you can see Visual Studio on the right side. I can teach you those shortcuts later on. And also you can see your desktop on the left side. In your desktop, you can see that folder that we created. Let me go ahead and open it up. And I'm going to switch this to the left side. So you can see within the folder, it looks exactly the same as what we have in Visual Studio Code. If we open dev, you see your website in there. The file has no extension, so it doesn't know what it is. All right, so I just wanted to point that out for you. Everything we keep doing here is going to be synchronized in there. It's simply the same thing. So let's expand this again and go from there. Now, I want you to notice what's going on at the bottom left of the screen. Right now, we don't have any extension for our file, so it is in plain text, right? It's telling us that the cursor is on line 1 and column 1. Here is your cursor blinking on line 1 and column 1. It's going to tell us that each tab is going to be 4 spaces, the tab key on your text on your keyboard, and you're using this encoding UTF-8. Now, in order for us to change and use a different programming language, you can click on plain text and select your language. There are so many different languages you can use with Visual Studio Code. Okay, this is the language we need. But for us to get this to happen automatically without us having to come in and select it, we need to rename our file. So right-clicking is very, very useful, not just in Visual Studio Code, but in any software that you use. So let's right-click, and in here you see the option all the way at the bottom that says rename. We are going to rename this and add an extension, HTML, and notice what happens to the left column. Once you put HTML, it adds an icon in there because it knows automatically that it's HTML. Once we click enter or save this, you will notice the change right here. So let's click enter, and now it automatically recognizes it as an HTML document. And that's about it. So before I go to demonstrate some of the code that we used in the previous video to describe the structure, the content, the structure which includes the head section and the body section, let me go ahead and show you a very quick shortcut to get started. Visual Studio Code comes in with some built-in tools that makes coding very easy for us. First, you have your line numbers. It's going to continue for each line, but the easiest way to get started is by typing an exclamation mark. So with one single entry, you can go ahead and create an HTML document. Notice that this gives you an Emmet abbreviation. If you expand that, there you go. That is your first piece of code that has been written. Okay, so let's undo that. Again, just an exclamation mark, and you can click on enter, and it automatically creates a doc type, which is the preamble, an HTML tag, which actually, if you put your mouse right next to the number, you can collapse it, and you can see that's the opening tag and the closing tag. The difference between the opening tag and the closing tag is the backslash. So let's make this a little bit bigger so we can see clearly. I'm going to hide this Explorer column so we can see clearly what our code is. So again, we started with a doc type. You can put your mouse over it and it will give you more information about it. Except it doesn't want to do that to me. Why is that? Awesome. Well, we collapsed the HTML, which is the root element, starts from 2 and ends at 11. We can expand it again. And now you can see there's a head element, which starts from 3 and ends at 7. The head element has some metadata in there and a title, which we should probably change to reflect our website. So we can go ahead and say my first website. All of that information is going to be displayed on your tab when it's time for you to view your code using a browser. And now the body section starts with on line 8 and ends at line 10, but there is no content in the body. So that is as easy as that. You already have your first HTML document. Let's stop here for now. Think about it before we get to see what the document looks like on the browser. Okay, after this brief reflection, let's go ahead and see what it looks like in the browser. Maybe I should make this a little bit smaller. And remember, our Explorer is to the left. Our document has been created in the dev folder. Let's go ahead and take a look at that folder one more time. So here is the dev folder, and here is our first HTML document. Notice that the type has now changed. It says it's a Chrome HTML document because we set up the Chrome browser as our default web browser. So if we open this document right now, it's going to be opened in the web browser. Let's double click and it opens up. Nothing shows up. The only thing we can see here is my first website, which is the title. Okay, so we can go ahead and put this on the side and minimize the Explorer type in anything within the body section. Remember, the head section is for metadata. The body section is this area that is actually visible on the web page. Now we can say hello Africa. Once you enter that information, we wasted a little bit of time. This shows that the file has been saved. While you are typing, you will notice that the file doesn't get saved, but if your file is not yet saved, you will have a white dot at the end of the tab, but it gets automatically saved because that's what we did. Now that we've done that, we need to go back to our page and refresh it, and voila, we see hello Africa in there. But we don't need to keep doing that. There are some extensions that we can use to make our life easier. Next up, I'll show you a couple of extensions that you can add to your code, Visual Studio Code that is, to make it easier for you to write code. Okay, so for now, you do have access to the basic bare bones Visual Studio Code without extensions, but you can still write your query, your HTML file. If you put your mouse over it, it should give you details about each element. For instance, the HTML element is a root element, the head element is a collection of metadata, the body element, and so on and so forth. So if you need to learn any of those, feel free to hover on top of the element. It will give you more information. Clicking on MDN references, that's Mozilla Developer Network, it's going to take you exactly to more information about that element. All right.